Let me start by saying that I know that for many people, this video is going to be extremely basic. And I'm not at all saying that what is contained in this video is the only way to read the Bible, or even the only good way to read the Bible. But I am constantly amazed by how many people seem to be operating under this fear of reading the Bible, that somehow there's a secret code they have to unlock, or a secret skill that they don't have that would enable them to read the Bible. People are worried about reading Scripture wrong. So let me start with a reassurance. The Bible is not written in secret code. There is no secret key that you need to unlock it. It was not meant to be cryptic. The vast majority of the Bible was written in very simple language in its day and was meant to be understood by the people who first read it. There are two main reasons why what was so clear once seems unclear to us today. First is that we're using bad translations. We're using translations that are hard for us to read and hard for us to understand. Second, our culture in the modern age is radically different than what was around during the time that the Bible was written. So many references and commonplace ideas in the Bible we simply don't have a point of reference for, like winnowing wheat by hand, raising cattle, or the reality of famine in times of drought. The first problem is pretty easy to overcome just by switching translations. We need to find a translation that we understand, that we enjoy reading, and use that as our main translation. Only switching to other ones once we've read the one that we understand the best. The more we use a translation, the better we understand it. So if we start with a translation that we already understand and we use it primarily, it will only help us as we read the Bible. The second problem is a lot harder to overcome, but a good study Bible can help a great deal. There are hundreds of study Bibles out there today, but try and stay away from any that have life or application or somebody's name in the title. The problem isn't that people need help applying Scripture to their lives. The problem is that we need help understanding Scripture. And once we really get a hold of what Scripture was saying then, it's really easy to apply it to our lives today. And if we make that connection ourselves instead of having someone else make it for us, it will be so much more powerful. It's more work, but it's also significantly more reward from our study of Scripture in the long run. I find it helpful to begin and end my time of reading the Bible with prayer. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it's something that in my mind and in my heart sets aside reading the Bible as something different than reading any other book. And it helps focus my mind on seeking God as opposed to just gaining information. Because we get out of reading the Bible what we put into it and what we expect to find. So if we only expect to find information and we read it like we would any other book, then we're just going to get out of it what we would from any other book. Which leads to my first recommendation of actually reading the Bible. Slow down. I have read the Bible in many, many different ways, including plowing through the entire thing in just under a week and a half. And I advise nothing more highly than slowing down. You wouldn't go on a date with your significant other, sit down at a restaurant and say, we have 16 sentences to get through tonight, and then we'll pick it up tomorrow, and then just walk out when you've hit your quota, right? Nor would you just rush through the conversation and ask them to give you a one-sentence answer to a whole list of questions that you have. No, you savor the moment. You listen. Take your time. Pay attention to what they're saying, not just rush through it. The same is true with Scripture. Don't put yourself on a quota of how much you need to read the Bible, and don't rush through it. Because we aren't reading the Bible just to be informed. We're reading the Bible to be transformed into the image of God. Once I start reading the Bible, I find it most helpful to start small and then work outwards. Usually I start with a self-contained unit, a little story within a story, a section that makes sense by itself. I'm going to use Isaiah 7 as an example today, but before you get started reading Scripture at all, it is important to understand what literary genre that part of the Bible is. No one reads a love letter the same way that they do a user agreement on a mobile app. Shakespeare's sonnets convey truth differently than a physics textbook. The same is true with the Bible. It is filled with poetry and prophecy, narrative, history, and law. And each of them conveys truth differently and should be approached slightly differently. In this case, Isaiah is a book of prophecy, and prophecy is designed to be God's commentary on what the people are doing. So prophecy is always rooted in a historical situation that the people are either misunderstanding what is going on enough or misbehaving badly enough that God had to send somebody to interpret their day and age for them. Looking at the passage, first, read it over slowly several times. Note any key words or anything that stands out. In this case, there are several key words that pop out to me, and I'm reminded of Matthew when he quotes this same passage about Jesus being Emmanuel. But this version doesn't mention a virgin, which definitely stands out to me. Next, read it through in another version as well, preferably one radically different than your main. So watch for where they disagree. Not about word order, but about major issues. The NIV says virgin, and the difference between weary and trying patience stands out to me as well. So whenever versions differ like this, there's either a difference in how they understand the word that they're translating, there's a difference in the text that they're basing their translation off of, or there's a theological reason that leads one translation to translate it differently than another. So which is it? A good study Bible or reference Bible will help a lot here by identifying the textual, the linguistic issues. In this case, the root Hebrew word means young woman, but the Greek Septuagint, which Matthew quotes, reads virgin. So many translations use the Greek for this word in the Old Testament to make sure that the two quotes match. Begin to ask questions of the text. Why does the kingdom need a sign? Why would a king refuse a sign from God? That seems pretty weird. Is God always so pushy with shoving a sign on someone? If not, then what makes this moment so important? What does Emmanuel mean? Was that a normal name? Did Isaiah mean Jesus at the time? Ask questions. Explore the text, but don't expect every question you have to be answered, and that's okay. Sometimes living with a question and seeking answers is better for us than any answer we might find. Once you've gotten everything you can from the passage, then widen your field of vision. Remember that chapter and verse numbers are relatively recent, and so ignore them as much as you can. What light do the surrounding verses shed on the passage that you're studying? Where does this passage fit into the context of this section of the book, into the book as a whole, or into the history of God's people that the Bible tells? This part of Isaiah fits into one of the worst times of Judah's history. Assyria was the power in the region, and Israel, Judah's more powerful northern neighbor, was trying to get Judah to rebel against Assyria. When Judah refused, Israel attacked them with their allies, and Judah completely panicked. Isaiah came in to remind Judah that God was in control. The king was struggling to believe, so Isaiah offered him a sign because it was critically important that the king stayed strong and the people stayed strong and had faith in God in this moment. The sign was that a young woman just now becoming pregnant would, by the time the kid was born, be able to, with a straight face, name the child God with us, which is what Emmanuel means. And that then by the time the child had reached maturity, all of the nations that were attacking Judah would be completely destroyed. This was to strengthen the spine of the king so he would not yield to Israel and doom the entire nation. As I read, I put myself in the shoes of the different characters in the story, and not just the main ones. What would the king have been feeling, facing down an army without any hope at all? Would Isaiah have been frustrated at the king for showing so little faith, so little willingness to listen to God? What would a guard have been feeling like who listened to this conversation, or an average person off the street who was worried about dying? Allow for the humanity of the people in any story that you read in the Bible because they were human. They went through all of the same emotions, all of the same fears, all of the same doubts and successes that we do. Then, how does this passage fit into the Bible as a whole? Do any other passages deal with the same topic? Do any other passages quote this one? If they do they treat it similarly or do they treat it differently? Now, in this case, Matthew quotes part of this exact passage as a prophecy toward Jesus, which is a very different context than the one that we find here in Isaiah. Well, the issue of whether God comes through or not in times of trouble is something that resonates throughout the whole of Scripture. When I know as much as I can about the passage, then it's time to start applying it. Though some of that should hopefully have been taking place as well as I study. So what matches and what is different between my context and the original one? How are my feelings and my situation similar to that of the original readers? Have I ever been in a similar place? How would I have felt? So in summary, pick a version that is clear and is easy for you to understand. And start there. Expect people to be human in the Bible because they are. Identify the genre of that passage and keep it in mind as you read. Start small and go slow. You're not racing, you're seeking God. Then identify important words, important phrases, and ideas in the passage and start asking questions. When you have a good grasp of one translation, check out a different one. Where are they the same? Where do they disagree? Why might they disagree in this? Then expand the context. What is happening around this passage? How does it fit into the section, the book, the genre, or the entire history of God's people? What other passages deal with the same issue? And when you have learned as much as you possibly can, put yourselves in the shoes of everyone in the passage, especially the least of these, the smaller people. How would they have felt? How would they have experienced this? How would you have felt about this if you were present when this happened? Then look for avenues of connection between those people's situations and your own. That's where you find the applications. Now, of course, this is just a very brief overview, but I hope that it has given some people a little bit more confidence in reading Scripture, because it isn't a secret code to unlock. It was meant to be clear, and it can be clear for us too. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great day. See you next video.